The 13th tribe, the Khazar Empire and its heritage. I have quoted Ibn Fadlan's Odyssey at some length, not so much because of the scant information he provides about the Khazars themselves, but because of the light it throws on the world which surrounded them. The stark barbarity of the people amidst whom they lived, reflecting their own past prior to the conversion. For by the time of Ibn Fadlan's visit to the Bulgars, Khazaria was a surprisingly modern country compared to its neighbors. The contrast is evidenced by the reports of other Arab historians and is presented on every level, from housing to the administrations of justice. The Bulgars still live exclusively in tents, including the king, although the royal tent is very large, holding 1,000 people or more. On the other hand, the Khazar Khagan inhabits a castle built of burnt brick. His ladies are said to inhabit palaces with roofs of teak, and the Muslims have several mosques, among them one whose minaret rises above the royal castle. In the fertile regions, their farms and cultivated areas stretched out continuously over 60 or 70 miles. They also had extensive vineyards. Thus, Ibn Hakal said that in Khazaria, there is a certain city called Asmid, Samandar, which has so many orchards and gardens that from Darband to Sirer, the whole country is covered with gardens and plantations belonging to this city. It is said that there are about 40,000 of them. Many of these produce grapes. The region north of the Caucasus was extremely fertile. In AD 968, Ibn Hakal met a man who had visited it after a Russian raid. He said there is not a pittance left for the poor in any vineyard or garden, not a leaf on the bough, but owing to the excellence of their land and the abundance of its produce, it will not take 3 years until it becomes again what it was. Caucasian wine is still a delight, consumed in vast quantities in the Soviet Union. However, the royal treasury's main source of income was foreign trade. The sheer volume of the trading caravans plying their way between Central Asia and the Volga-Ural region is indicated by Ibn Fadlan. We remember that the caravan his mission joined at Gurgang consisted of 5,000 men and 3,000 pack animals, making due allowance for exaggeration. It must still have been a mighty caravan, and we do not know how many of these were at any time on the move, nor what goods they transported, although textiles, dried fruit, honey, wax, and spices seem to have played an important part. A second major trade route led across the Caucasus to Armenia, Georgia, Persia, and Byzantium. A third consisted of the increasing traffic of Rus merchant fleets down the Volga to the eastern shores of the Khazar Sea, carrying mainly precious furs, much in demand among the Muslim aristocracy. and slaves from the north, sold at the slave market of It-Il. On all of these transit goods, including the slaves, the Khazar ruler levied a tax of 10%. Adding to this, the tribute paid by Bulgars, Magyars, Burtas, and so on. One realizes that Khazaria was a prosperous country, but also that its prosperity depended to a large extent on its military power and the prestige it conveyed on its tax collectors and customs officials. Apart from the fertile regions of the south, with their vineyards and orchards, the country was poor in natural resources. One Arab historian, Istaq Hari, says that the only native product they exported was isinglass. This again is certainly an exaggeration, yet the fact remains that their main commercial activity seems to have consisted in re-exporting goods brought in from abroad. Among these goods, honey and candle wax particularly caught the Arabs' chronicler's imagination. Thus, Muqaddas said that in Khazaria, sheep, honey, and Jews exist in large quantities. It is true that one source, the Darband Nama, mentions gold or silver mines in Khazar territory, but their location has not been ascertained. On the other hand, several of these sources mention Khazar merchandise seen in Baghdad and the presence of Khazar merchants in Constantinople, Alexandria, and as far afield as Samaria and Fergana. Thus, Khazaria was by no means isolated from the civilized world. Compared to its tribal neighbors in the north, it was a cosmopolitan country, open to all sorts of cultural and religious influences, yet jealously defending its independence against the two ecclesiastical world powers. We shall see that attitude prepare the grounds for the coup d'etat, or coup d'etat, which established Judaism as the state religion. The arts and crafts seem to have flourished, including haute culture. When the future emperor Constantine V married the Khazar Kagan's daughter, she brought with her dowry a splendid dress which so impressed the Byzantine court that it was adopted as a male ceremonial robe. They called it Zitziakian, derived from the Khazar Turkish pet name of the princess, which was Chikak, or flower, until she was baptized Irene. Here, Toynbee comments, we have an illuminating fragment of cultural history when another Khazar princess married the Muslim governor of Armenia. Her cavalcade contained, apart from attendants and slaves, 10 tents mounted on wheels, made of the finest silk with gold and silver-plated doors, the floors covered with sable furs. 20 others carried the gold and silver vessels and other treasures which were her dowry. The Kagan himself traveled in a mobile tent, even more luxuriously equipped, carrying on its top a pomegranate of gold. Khazar art, like that of the Bulgars and the Magyars, was mainly imitative, modeled on Persian Sassanid patterns. The Soviet archaeologist Bader said that emphasized the role of the Khazars in the spreading of Persian-style silverware towards the north. Some of these finds may have been re-exported by the Khazars, true to their role as middlemen. Others were imitations made in Khazar workshops, the ruins of which have been traced near the ancient Khazar fortress of Sarkel. The jewelry unearthed within the confines of the fortress was of local manufacturer. The Swedish archaeologist T.J. Arn mentions ornamental plates, clasps, and buckles found as far as Sweden of Sassanid and Byzantine inspiration, manufactured in Khazaria or territories under their influence. Thus, the Khazars were the principal intermediaries in the spreading of Persia and Byzantine art among the semi-barbaric tribes of Eastern Europe. After his exhaustive survey of the archaeological and documentary evidence, mostly from Soviet sources, Bartha concludes, the sack of Tiflis by the Khazars, presumably in the spring of AD 629, is relevant to our subject. During the period of occupation, the Khagan sent out inspectors to supervise the manufacture of gold, silver, iron, and copper products. Similarly, the bazaars, trade in general, even the fisheries, were under their control. Thus, in the course of their incessant Caucasian campaigns during the 7th century, the Khazars made contact with a culture which had grown out of the Persian Sassanid tradition. Accordingly, the products of this culture spread to the people of the steppes not only by trade, but by means of plunder and even by taxation. All the tracks that we have assiduously followed in the hope of discovering the origins of Magyar art in the 10th century have led us back to Khazar territory. The last remark of the Hungarian scholar refers to the spectacular archaeological finds known as the treasures of Nagazin Timikilos. The treasure, consisting of 23 gold vessels dating from the 10th century, was found in 1791 in the vicinity of the village of that name. Bartha points out that the figure of the victorious prince dragging a prisoner along by his hair and the mythological scene at the back of the golden jar, as well as the design of other ornamental objects, shows close affinities with the finds in Novi Pazar in Bulgaria and in Khazar Sarkel, as both Magyars and Bulgars were under Khazar suzerainty for protracted periods. This is not very surprising, and the warrior, together with the rest of the treasure, gives us at least some idea of the arts practiced within the Khazar Empire. The Persian and Byzantine influence is predominant, as one would expect. One school of Hungarian archaeologists maintains that the 10th century gold and silversmiths working in Hungary were actually Khazars, as we shall see later on when the Magyars migrated into Hungary in 896. They were led by a descendant Khazar tribe known as the Kabars, who settled with them in their new home. The Khazars were known as skilled gold and silversmiths. The originally more primitive Magyars only acquired these skills in their new country. Thus, the theory of the Khazar origin of at least some of the archaeological finds in Hungary is not implausible, as will become clearer in the light of the Magyar-Khazar nexus discussed later on.